everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Alex and today I'm going to be doing a review of the extremely popular The ThreeBody Problem by Cixin Liu. To tell you a bit of what this book is about, it begins with our character Yi during China's Cultural Revolution and the murder of her father. This event is going to set off a chain reaction for the rest of her life. We then jump forward 4 decades in the future where a hard-ass, unorthodox cop, Dashi, enlists the help of a nanotech engineer, Wang Miao. And together they have to try to solve a series of suicides of prominent scientists and also uncover why so many world leaders are saying that they're at war, but nobody seems to know with whom. And the key to all of this lies in the mysterious video game called ThreeBody. For starters, first comment, my brain finds translated works much harder to read than it should. I honestly think that it has to do with the formality of the language, the fact that the dialogue is written in such a way that people don't naturally talk. So the first 50 pages of this book were a bit slower for me to get through, but it became a non-issue by the end of the story. So if you decide to read this and your brain is anything like mine, please just push through because I promise that it does get better. Also, I have not heard about China's Cultural Revolution since I was in middle school, so I ended up doing some extra research outside of the translator's notes, not because the translator's notes were bad, but because I wanted extra context for the story because I had forgotten so much. I'm one of those people that really doesn't mind at all when I have to do extra research in order to get the context of a story. I'm probably weird that way, but I will say if you're somebody that doesn't like to do that, the Cultural Revolution aspect, once you get through the first part of the book, which really is quite short, it doesn't play that big of an impact in the narrative overall, so it's really not a big deal if you don't understand the cultural context. For me, I just don't like being lost in any regard. I spent the first couple days into reading The ThreeBody Problem trying to figure out why it felt both familiar and new, and I figured it out. I have read from many masters of science fiction and classic science fiction as well. So we're talking Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, Clifford D. Simic, Ray Bradbury, William Gibson, among others. And all of them have a common theme and thread in their writing, mostly due to the time period in which they were writing science fiction. They're not typically character focused. It's not as important to dwell on the thoughts and feelings or motivations of a character as it is to go on the journey with them. The ThreeBody Problem is similarly plot-driven and focused on big ideas, which will absolutely be some people's cup of tea and definitely not for others. That said, the difference between those stories and this one is the science, and that's what makes it so new. When you read older science fiction, it seems almost fantastical, kind of fanciful, hilarious, even because you're talking about authors who thought that there was maybe life on Mars, there was the potential we could get invaded, that there were people living under our feet in a hollow earth theory. This is far more modern. The ThreeBody Problem for me in 2024 must have been how some people felt in the 40s and 50s reading magazines like Astounding Science Fiction. All of that said, I want to be clear, I still really liked the characters in this book, even if it wasn't a character-driven story. And overall, I felt so much joy reading this. I was smiling like an idiot several times during this book just because of how much I was learning, and that makes me ecstatic. I love to learn new things in books. This story doesn't really reach a level of being high concept, at least not to me, until about the middle, where we start getting into mathematics and the unsolvable three-body problem. Now, I am not a mathematician. I can do algebra, geometry, trigonometry, pre-calculus, but I got into calculus and I said, fuck this shit, I'm out, and I left. So I'm definitely not a mathematician, but I love theory and I love physics, so I'm going to do my best to explain the title of this book to you. And the best part is it's not a spoiler because it's something that mathematicians have been trying to solve since the 1600s. Also, you might be able to hear birds chirping and dogs barking, so let that be the background music to my wonderful teaching. Put into the simplest terms I can, Isaac Newton was able to give us equations to solve for the orbit of 2 bodies. A body in this case is anything with significant enough mass and gravity that it can act upon something else. So think a planet, a sun, a black hole. There is a way to predict the orbit of two bodies if you look at the center of gravity between them, which really just looks like the middle of a Venn diagram. But when you throw a third body in there, it messes everything up. Because even slight variations in the velocity or trajectory of one body can change the velocity and trajectory of the other two. There was an experiment conducted in 2009 where two researchers were able to predict the orbits of every single planet in our solar system out to 5 billion years. Yes, that's billion with a B. They manually adjusted the orbit of only one planet, Mercury, by moving it less than a millimeter closer to or further from the sun in their calculations. And what they found was quite disturbing. In 1% of those simulations, those seemingly insignificant changes caused Mercury to hurtle into the sun, hurtle into Venus, or completely change the orbit of Earth. In the end, what makes the three-body problem unsolvable is that there are too many unknown variables in a 3 or more body system to be able to accurately predict how they will interact with one another over many years. This behavior is known as chaotic, rightfully so, and holds true except in special cases, which I am not going to get into here. I hope that helped, or at least didn't make things worse. Are you still awake? What I'm telling you is to read this book if you're a big old nerd, okay? Because basing a novel on a mathematical problem is both wild and a surprising amount of fun. One of the things I loved about this and found so impressive is that there is no detail that goes unexplained. There's no odd comment that is left unresolved. Session Leo was extremely thorough, and I cannot even tell you how excited I am to read The Dark Forest. I enjoyed this book so much that I'm actually considering watching the TV show adaptation that's coming out on Prime, which really says something because I generally hate adaptations, cue The Expanse, but I'm willing to give it a shot when it comes out in March, so we'll see how it goes. Before I move on to the spoiler section, since I know I did such a good job of convincing at least some of you to want to read this book, I am going to leave you with a quote that gives you a taste of what the writing of this book is like. Is it possible that the relationship between humanity and evil is similar to the relationship between the ocean and an iceberg floating on its surface? Both the ocean and the iceberg are made of the same material. That the iceberg seems separate is only because it is in a different form. In reality, it is but a part of the vast ocean. This was incredible. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it, would highly recommend it. And now I'm going to move on to the spoiler section. So I'm not going to be changing my background because the lighting in here is weird today. So I'm just going to give you a countdown. Click off if you don't want to hear anymore. All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, we are in the spoiler section, which means that you've either already read The Three-Body Problem or you just don't give a damn about spoilers, but either way, here we go. So, aliens. I love a good hostile alien plot. That is one of my favorite sci-fi tropes, but this book has got to take the cake. I don't think that I have ever read a narrative where one person out of over 7 billion people just completely rats humanity out. Yi starts a movement and kicks off the countdown to humanity's annihilation at the hands of the Trisolarans, and she doesn't even have to be alive to watch them show up. That honestly has to be some of the craziest shit I have ever read. Also, cards fully on the table, Dashi has to be an absolute bastard. And he was my favorite character. He has spent his entire career hunting down really creative criminals to the point where he has the ability to think like them, and all of the greatest ideas, at least in my opinion, came from him in this book, and he also has some really great quotes. My first quote that I highlighted from him was on page 142, and it said, "I did indeed invent an ultimate rule. Anything sufficiently weird must be fishy." I'm saying that there's always someone behind things that don't seem to have an explanation. And then just 4 pages later, Wang and Dashi are still talking, and Wang has a realization about Dashi's method, which is this. He says, "Pseudoscience. Do you know who they're most afraid of?" Dashi says, "Scientists, of course." And Wang says, "No, Many of the best scientists can be fooled by pseudoscience and sometimes devote their lives to it. But pseudoscience is afraid of one particular type of people who are very hard to fool. Stage magicians. So Dashi is essentially the stage magician of criminal enterprise and criminal thinking, and I loved that. I think Dashi really showed his, I don't want to say his character, because I think his character is that he is an absolute bastard, but he showed his faith in humanity, that humanity can survive, because after the news is let out that yes, alien invaders are coming, they're probably going to destroy humanity, Wang loses all hope that humanity will be able to survive. And he's like, well, I might as well just drink myself into a stupor. And Dashi takes him out into this field and has him look at the bugs. And Wang has a realization about what Dashi is trying to tell him. And I wanted to share that with you as well, because I thought it was a really beautiful part of the book. Humans have used everything in their power to extinguish them. Every kind of poison, aerial spray, introducing and cultivating their natural predators, searching for and destroying their eggs, using genetic modification to sterilize them, burning with fire, drowning with water. Every family has bug spray. Every desk has a fly swatter under it. This long war has been going on for the entire history of human civilization, but the outcome is still in doubt. The bugs have not been eliminated. Dashi is not a scientist, he doesn't consider himself to be a particularly intelligent man, he's just kind of a crafty one, but his faith that humanity will be able to survive against a force that is so clearly superior to them was really nice and surprisingly optimistic for him. Also, who could possibly forget that cutting a ship into small pieces with nanotechnology was his idea? So I'm just putting it out there that the real MVP of this book is Dashi. The introduction to the ThreeBody game was definitely strange, and I wondered, where are we going with this? But once it's revealed that we are seeing the history of the Trisolarans through the lens of human development, I was like, wow, this is actually genius, and I love it. This book made me think about video games as propaganda, because while this is a fictional story, we absolutely do have the capacity to create an online game where people could go and anybody could play it, but only certain people who pass a specific threshold would be able to join an organization or be a part of a select group, and that's kind of nefarious to think about. There was really only one part of the book that I didn't enjoy, and that was close to the very end when we get the info dump about the Trisolarans and how they learned about Earth. The reason that I found that frustrating is because Session Leo was so careful through the rest of the book in kind of piecing out what we were learning in bite-sized chunks rather than just dumping it in our lap. And it felt kind of silly to me almost that suddenly we're just being given all of this information. And don't get me wrong, I loved learning about the aliens, but I think that that could have been done in a slightly different way. Fortunately, that didn't take up a large section of the book, and it really wasn't a hindrance to the story overall. So I'm definitely going to say that this is still 5 stars. I learned so much reading this. I have high hopes for the series. My fingers are crossed. Please let me know down in the comments if you were interested in reading this book or if you have read it already, because I would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, that you all stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.